Hola, Minasan! Welcome back for another round of Warhammer research. Oh yeah, last time learned about specific Necron characters like the Silent King and Imhotep. uh, but the big question is, what factions are they from? What about their factions? Because I've been hearing about that a lot, these specific dynasties, uh, and that's got my attention. So now that we learned about the individual characters, let's learn about the groups that make up the Necrons. Over at Weshammer, Every Necron Faction Explained. Very simple, very straightforward. Link is down in the comment below. And now get your notes together for my post-research thoughts. This is a call to action. Comment, like, subscribe, follow, hit the notification button, and let us begin the research.
The Necrons of Warhammer 40k are by far one of the most beloved and feared factions in the entirety of the grimdark future. And it's easy to understand why. They're immortal androids that have existed in our galaxy longer than perhaps any other species. They all went to sleep 60 million years ago and woke back up to find their planets infested with the verminous filth of what they consider to be lesser life forms. Now these spooky undead robots harness some of the most mysterious and powerful weapons of destruction ever documented by mankind. And these guys won't rest until they purge every last living squatter from the surface of their worlds.
Damn.
But the Necrons don't exist as a singular collective. There are a lot of different Necron dynasties, each with their own unique culture, history, and ways of conducting war. From the relentless and implacable crusading forces of the mighty SYOSETSU dynasty that seek not only to conquer the worlds of lesser species, but also all those of the other Necron dynasties as well. Everything is fair game according to the SYOSETSU. There's also the dynasty of the Novakith, which is infamous for its history of blood rituals and relentlessly savage melee combatants that get stronger and faster the more foes they slaughter.
Wow, look at that.
Then there's the Mefrit dynasty that is actually looked down upon by many of the other Necron dynasties as being too ruthless in their conquest. Their perspective is, why waste time fighting up close and personal when you can absolutely obliterate your foe with an overwhelming onslaught of sheer ballistic destruction?
True,
Or, you know,
very
just
true.
explode their sun. Whatever works. We're gonna be talking.
Let's hold that thought for a second before we get into the first group here. He's 100% right. That group is 100% right. If you got nukes, why are you gonna do landfall and have land battles? Just freaking nuke from orbit. If you can nuke from orbit, just nuke everything from orbit. Pick up the pieces later. especially if you're metal. If you're a metallic being and you can survive radiation, just nuke. I know. Trazen will not want the history of the Necrons to be vaporized into oblivion. I understand, but why are you gonna waste your time doing a land battle if you can shoot from high in the sky?
Talking about all that and a whole lot more, and by the end of this video, you're gonna know everything you need to know about all of the Necron dynasties.
Alright.
The SYOSETSU dynasty is by far the largest and most powerful dynasty that currently exists in the 42nd millennium. Now this is in no small part due to the relentlessly aggressive expansion efforts of its pharaoh, Imhotep the Stormlord, who maintains a join us or die perspective when it comes to Necron diplomacy. The dynasty's crown world is known as Mandragora the Golden, and it is said to be the physical embodiment of the spirit of the SYOSETSU. It is a dire and grim world, macabre in its magnificence, and fortified to such a ridiculous degree that the idea that anyone would even conceive of mounting an invasion against it is an impossible and somewhat hilarious jest. Not only is Mandragora the center of the SYOSETSU's military power, but it is from here that the dynasty orchestrates its galactic conquest. It's important to remember that their crown world is not the only world they control, as they have over 80 different tomb worlds, as well as hundreds of other planets that were originally controlled by lesser species and they have subsequently conquered. They've managed to conquer this much in only a couple of centuries, and this probably wouldn't have been possible if it hadn't been for Imhotep the Stormlord, who seized control for himself when the first SYOSETSU Necrons began to wake up. And if you want to know more about this awesome character, I actually did an entire deep dive specifically on him and his history, so you should definitely check that out after you watch this video. I'll throw a link in the description and I'll have it posted at the end of the video as well. For the SYOSETSU dynasty, enough is never enough. They're constantly seeking to raise more fleets, amass more armies, and conquer even more planets. The Great Stormlord will not rest until all of the Necron dynasties are unified under his banners, and the verminous filth that have come to inhabit the galaxy since the days of the War in Heaven are utterly and entirely eradicated. No matter what dynasty they come from, Necron nobility is not immune to entering bouts of petty squabbling and never-ending political wars, much like humans of the Imperium. They are a proud, egotistical, and arrogant species, and most often believe their dynasty's specific culture and way of life is superior to all others. That being said, all-out war between the dynasties in order to conquer their territory is relatively rare, but that's not the case with the SYOSETSU. They do not limit their conquest to only worlds inhabited by lesser species, as everything that finds itself in the path of its war fleets is fair game. And due to their immense power and numbers, practically all of the other dynasties either outright fear the Stormlord's armies, or at least respect him as a hunter might respect an ecosystem's apex predator. When the SYOSETSU come across another dynasty-controlled world, its Pharaoh has a choice to make. Either bend the knee and replace the banners with those of the Stormlords, or be broken down piece by piece and assimilated by force.
Damn!
He's a generous Pharaoh, and to those who show subservience, he rewards greatly. To all those who oppose him, however, he is utterly ruthless. When you try to directly compare the SYOSETSU Empire to the entirety of the Imperium of Man, their 80 such tomb worlds and a bunch of random planets they've conquered is pretty small by comparison. But considering they only woke back up a few centuries ago and have already managed to gain that much territory, it's logical to think that their military strength is expanding exponentially the more territory they manage to conquer. If they're not stopped within a few more centuries or even millennia, they could end up becoming an apocalyptic level threat. Over the last couple of decades, within Warhammer's lore, the SYOSETSU were always seen as the biggest, baddest, and strongest of all the Necron dynasties.
Okay.
But that's recently begun to change with the coming of the Silent King, as he has a...
Okay. The reason why I had to pause for a second is I had to first comprehend, because for me, dynasty is a unit of time, an era, like Qing Dynasty. That's the time period of Emperor Qing. That's what I was thinking when they keep saying dynasty. I didn't realize dynasty was actually a synonym for faction. So the SYOSETSU faction, the Zeracon faction. Maybe you guys can explain down below how the terminology works with that one, with dynasty, because for me, dynasty is in reference to a period of time under a specific ruler. That's why I'm like, my brain has kind of struggled to understand how is it that, that it was being spoken and like, so when he's saying SYOSETSU dynasty was fighting other dynasties, and I'm like, wait, what? They're factions or something? You know what I mean? Maybe you guys could explain that. That was just really really threw me off. So Zeracon dynasty. Oh, and speaking of that, SYOSETSU dynasty is crazy. Stormlord, epic metal name. Total metal name. And I like the fact that that he goes to that he actually goes to other Necron worlds and conquers them. It's like he's like, yeah, I don't care about the orcs right now. I'm just gonna take you over, and if you don't serve my banner, I'm going to melt you down and turn you into a completely different Necron. Oh man, Zeracon dynasty.
A dynasty of his own known as the Saracen dynasty. And although this event hasn't come to pass yet, it's inevitable that the Stormlord and the Silent King will soon find themselves in direct conflict with one another. When we talk about this dynasty in particular, it's important to know that it didn't always used to bear the Silent King's name, as the Silent King is not the first of his kind. There had been many Silent Kings that came before him. However, what the dynasty's original name was has been lost to time, as all of that knowledge was erased when Zarek initiated his command protocols that gave him control over all of the Necrons after biotransference. When the war in heaven came to a close, Zarek would tell all of the Necrons to go to sleep, and after this occurred, he severed those command protocols. When they all woke back up, the Necrons once again found themselves in control of their own bodies. All of the different Necrons have mixed feelings on Zarek. Some hate him and some still worship him. Considering that the Zarakan dynasty is the one that the current Silent King came from, all of the Necrons within it believe themselves to be the most superior of their kind. Many of the
All
other
right.
dynasties, on the other hand, are not entirely convinced. The Stormlord of the Sautek dynasty potentially being the most notable. The major thing that you have to understand about the state of the Necrons is that as an overall faction within the 42nd millennium, the vast majority of them have been asleep for over 60 million years, and a lot can happen during such a long period of time. Some dynasties
They're
were
out of
completely
place.
wiped out while they slept, whether due to vengeful Eldari raiders, new species that arose on the planet's surface and subsequently ended up wiping themselves and the planet out, or they may have been victims of a freak geological or astral phenomenon that ended up tearing the world apart. Although rare, some dynasties did
Makes
emerge
sense.
from the Great Sleep relatively unscathed, while others like the Zarakan dynasty suffered untold devastation without being completely pushed to extinction. Even worse still, when many of the other Necrons began to wake up, many of them ended up blaming the Silent King and thus his dynasty for the horrors they had faced during the War in Heaven,
I would.
and the subsequent downfall of their entire species due to the deals he made with the Catan. Many of them would end up taking vengeance on the sleeping Zarakan, inflicting even further devastation on the wounded dynasty. Despite all of this, the nobles of the dynasty remained confident in their own superiority, and believed with an almost fanatical devotion that the Silent King would indeed one day return and reward their loyalty. Some Necrons believed this to be nothing more than wishful thinking, while others secretly feared the possibility that their prophecies may eventually come to pass. Here's the thing about that superiority complex of theirs. It may actually be true. For one, there's this neutral faction known as the Triarch Praetorians that work throughout all of the other dynasties, but ultimately it's said that they only truly answered to the Silent King himself, and only offered their services when whatever the dynasty is trying to do would ultimately align with the Silent King's goals. They would frequently throw their support behind the Necrons of the Zarakan dynasty in particular, and would even assist them when going to war against other dynasties. On top of this, their cryptechs are somehow able to create weapons, armor, and war engines more powerful than those of even the strongest dynasties. And finally, their tomb worlds and repair facilities seem to operate with greater finesse and efficiency than any others. The strangest part of all of this is that even the lesser dynasties that would end up joining them would soon start displaying these same remarkable abilities. On one hand, we can assume that the Zarakan dynasty has access to knowledge that the others do not. But the lore tells us that this is not exactly the case, and something almost supernatural is manifesting amongst themselves and their allies.
The warp?
There's some kind of buried techno-wisdom deep within a Necron subconscious that is only unlocked when they pledge themselves fully to the Silent King. This may be a final promise by the man himself to the people he ruled over, that no matter what happened to them, they would always endure. Their beliefs would eventually be vindicated, as the Silent King did in fact return in the 41st millennium. With the prophesized day having finally come to pass, the Zarakan dynasty stands atop a vast horde of ancient treasures, super weapons of inconceivable destructive ability, and indomitable armies ready to march out and reclaim the galaxy for the Necron people. Many dynasties have either been absorbed by the Zarakan or have willingly allied themselves with the supreme ruler of all Necrons. All those who resist automatically declare themselves as opposed to his will. And in such troubling days, there are many Necron nobles who would willingly surrender their power to feel the unity and validation of a tyrant's hand on their shoulder once again. The Stormlord, however, of the Sautek dynasty, views the Silent King as a traitor, an individual that was responsible for their species' downfall and the apotheosis into their undying wraith-like forms. He has sworn to stand against the Silent King and his dynasty, and eventually, a cataclysmic event will come to pass when both of these titanic forces end up bumping into each other. Whereas the Sautek have the greatest numbers amongst all of the dynasties, and the Zarakan by far have the greatest influence. The Nihilic dynasty...
That's actually really amazing. You know, you would think that I like how this has been approached. You know, it's very easy. Well, okay. I'll use Star Trek as an example. Although later Star Trek episodes, shows were able to show that that there are rifts within a planet's infrastructure. A good example would be like the Klingon Empire. Prior to what they will have their civil war and everything, they were depicted as being 100% unified. You know what I'm saying? Same with the Romulans. They were depicted as being 100% unified. Vulcans, 100% unified. You know what I'm saying? Like, they were all unified. No internal conflicts. We could say Earth as well. was unified. You know what I'm saying? Like there wasn't a potential civil war type of thing. To see the, and we didn't get to the such things like that. Like, for example, the Star Trek episode Unification, which Leonard Nimoy reprised his role as Spock in The Next Generation, and there was a faction of Romulans who wanted to return, wanted to reunite with the Vulcans and had to deal with the Romulan High Command. Then of course there was the Civil War that happened with the Klingons in Next Generation that had a big, profound impact in future episodes. But in the early goings of Star Trek as a franchise, it was always one world, 100% united. There was no, unless they visited a whole new world. Like the one where they had the Gershwin, if I got his name right, he played an Adam West Batman, if I remember correctly, as the Riddler. He guest starred in that, where they had half side white, half side black, and then it was the reverse with the other guy, and then they both just fighting each other, and found out that the world was completely annihilated for good. I think it was called "Let This Be Their Last Stand" or something like that. The episode. So unless it wasn't like a major race like the Klingons or the Romulans or the Vulcans, you'll find they would visit a world that had conflict. But when it came to the major races itself, the ones that were always recurring, like the Klingons, they were always shown as being 100% united, and there was no sense in the early years of the franchise to show internal conflict. And that wouldn't happen until the TNG era, where not only did we get to see the Klingon Civil War happen, but also the Klingons wanting to make a peace treaty for the first time ever with the Federation in the Undiscovered Country, Star Trek 6, the Undiscovered Country, and showed that was it the Chancellor? One of the, I think it was the Chancellor, or if not the Chancellor, then one of the representatives wanted to make peace on the Enterprise, and he gets assassinated, and begged Kirk not to let the peace be broken, try and let peace between Klingons and humans happen, that kind of thing. It wasn't until much later. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is because, the reason why I pointed that out is because here, with the Necrons, upon, of course, this retcon, they're already right off the bat in conflict with each other. They're not 100% united completely. They've been factioned off, and there's a big, I guess, I don't want to say power vacuum. I think that would be a dumb thing to say. It's I guess, it's not really much of a power vacuum because the Silent King is running the whole shindig in his area, but then you have the Sawtech on their end with the Storm Lord running his side of the whole thing. Like everybody's running their own factions independent of each other, but now the absorption is beginning, and the Silent King is the one who's getting the devotion and loyalty because something. Well, it's definitely not the warp. I know I said the warp, but it's definitely not the warp that's triggering the whole thing. But it's it's that influence, coming from the computer part, that Borg thing, type of thing. So far, this is proving to be a very fun group, just as fun as the orcs. I definitely like where they're going with this story wise. Nihilak Dynasty. Nihilak. So yeah, just to finish, just to conclude, the Silent King, just not only being hated but loved. I guess loved by those because they achieved immortality. Hated by those because he basically threw them under the bus and then put them to sleep. Well, I don't think he put them to sleep. Did he put them to sleep? Oh crap! Now I forgot. Great. Now everybody's gonna be mad. Oh well. They'll correct me. And scream at me for not getting that right. Nihilek Dynasty. What was this group up to?
On the other hand, has perhaps something far more valuable than both of these things combined. Money, and lots of it. As will be a common theme with a lot
What
of
do
the
they
different
need
Necron
of money?
dynasties. The awakening of the Nihilek dynasty proved to be pretty difficult, as they found themselves in a hostile galaxy
Nihilek.
with considerably diminished
Nihilism.
resources compared to when they originally went to sleep. The surviving nobility decided that for the good of the dynasty and the increased chance of survival, they would consolidate all of their strength on a single planet, the crown world of Geddon, which ended up proving to be the right move. Even during the Days of Flesh, the Nihilek were said to be tremendously rich, holding vast resources of wealth and priceless treasure vaults, making them one of the most powerful political influences within the courts of the Necron tier. This remains true even in the 42nd millennium, as when they moved all of their forces to Geddon, they also funneled all of that wealth into the planet's hyperspatial vaults. These gaudy Necrons now funnel their tremendous cache of resources into legions of war engines and raise ever more mighty defenses, while equipping their warriors with the finest Necron weaponry imaginable. When the lesser races sought to challenge them, they hurled army after army against their newly fortified borders, and each and every time, they ended up being repelled with devastating casualties. No matter what dynasty they come from, Necron nobles tend to be pretty arrogant and petty. But for the aristocracy of the Nihilek
It's
dynasty,
like the orcs.
this is pushed into a completely different strata. Every perceived slight, whether real or imaginary by lesser species, would be answered with utter annihilation. Out of all of the Nihilek's great and terrible treasures, perhaps their most valuable is the preserved head of a Yith seer. This ancient relic allows the Necrons that use it to peer into the schemes of the future to determine outcomes that would be most beneficial to the dynasty. With this remarkably powerful prescient ability, the Nihilek would always strike precisely where and when they needed to in order to crush any interlopers. Whereas in the early days of the dynasty's reawakening, they focused entirely on defense and creating an impenetrable bastion from which to garner strength, they have begun to utilize the Yith-Seer's head to instead go on the offense, marching out to conquer new territories before reinforcing them with Noctilith pylons before advancing out again. This strategy has led them to have less overall territory than many of the other dynasties, but every single planet they control is ridiculously powerful and well-equipped in its own right. In recent years, the dynasty has pledged its allegiance and full support to the Silent King, and seeks nothing short of complete galactic dominance for its people. Although the previous dynasties we've talked about here are definitely involved in a lot of political squabbling, the next dynasty we're going to talk about has...
That's hilarious. Nihilism. Oh, guys, I hope I'm wrong with that connection, because that seems too on the nose. Oh my gosh, they're operating on austerity measures. The freaking robots with money. Oh, guys, what in the Futurama is this? This is that is pretty hilarious. Yeah, if you have money, use it. You know, amass your wealth, buy weapons, buy armies. What do they need the money for? They're robots now. Oh my gosh, I get like, man, how do they get the? How do they get the adrenaline? I guess they could still generate adrenaline within just amassing all that wealth. That I guess well, now that considering that they're all the protocols have freed them and gave them free will, I guess that makes perfect sense that even with the even though they don't have flesh to satiate the pleasures of the body, with that money, they still found ways to use that. That's pretty insane. Pretty hilarious. Amass a sphere of influence and everything. And have one of the most tightest defenses imaginable. That could only be rivaled, I guess, by the Stormlord and the Silent King. Novak Dynasty is next.
Has gone the exact opposite direction, one in which many individuals within the Necron courts would define as complete and utter insanity. Even during the times of flesh, before biotransference, the Novak dynasty stood apart from the others and was infamous for its sheer barbaric brutality. They practiced long and elaborate blood rituals, and their armies were said to be utterly horrifying to face in battle. Even now, within the 42nd millennium, old habits tend to die hard, and the Necrons of the Novak are perhaps the purest form of Necron terror made manifest. The galaxy is no stranger to horrifying armies that drench themselves in blood and methodically butcher their way across the killing fields. But it's one thing to see sentient creatures made of flesh doing this, and an entirely different thing when it's done by glass-eyed androids that conduct their butchery with not only the skill of the galaxy's most esteemed surgeons, but a cold, logic-driven mathematical approach to murder that is completely alien and seemingly impossible to comprehend. It's as if war to them is less a battle for honor and territory, and more like a hyper-advanced industry of slaughter. They offer no quarter and no mercy for their victims, hacking all that stand before them apart like lunatic butchers set loose in a pen of livestock, their brutality only ceasing when their armies are completely drenched in gore and their foes are left as nothing more than dismembered meat. Most Necrons that exist in the 42nd millennium have a very fragmentary memory of the days of flesh and the rich history of their dynasty's unique cultures and traditions. This is true of the Novak as well. The memory of the blood rituals still linger in the deepest recesses of their personality engrams, although the purpose for which these rituals were conducted in the first place has now been lost. Now in battle, when the enemy's blood begins to flow, those engrams trigger and they provide the soldiers with a surge of vigor and aggression that is said to be almost narcotic. Every enemy they cut down, every severed limb that flies overhead, and every foe they burst apart into a cloud of red mist further pushes them deeper and deeper into their frenzy. The nobility of the dynasty takes full advantage of this particular mental state, fielding vast infantry-based armies full of blade-wielding Lich Guard and other melee-based units equipped with monomolecular weaponry and transdimensional swords that owe their impossible sharpness to the fact that the blades themselves vibrate across dimensions. In addition to these troops, the Novak are infamous for employing more Necrons that have fallen to the Destroyer curse than any other dynasty. Many other Necrons believe this to be an incredibly reckless course of action, as the Destroyers are nearly impossible to control and are utterly obsessed with the eradication of organic life. Their armies alone are a terrifying sight, but once that bloodlust begins to come online and the butchery truly begins, the might of the dynasty is fully revealed in a gory, blood-drenched brilliance. Their armies marching out across the stars to slaughter greenskins and human alike, with no sign of slowing down, until every system is drenched in blood. If the Novak dynasty...
Wow. So basically, that's their version of the WOG. Dang. Just suck up all that blood, get an adrenaline rush, turns it blood being narcotic, all that crazy... Oh, damn. Whoo. I do not want to confront them, I could tell you that much. Very straightforward writing on their part. Just suck up the blood, get an adrenaline rush, get an all-time high, go full berserker mode and just surgically annihilate everyone in their way. Even with all the... I don't even want to know what the rituals were. Probably like ripping hearts out and everything. Probably ripping out hearts and eating brains and liver. Who knows? Probably cannibalizing people and such. Blood for the blood gods, I guess. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's that was pretty short and quick, all things considered. I guess since there's they're that simple, they probably don't even have like a specific person, specific character that they would follow. You know, saying like the Stormlord, the Silent King. Mefrit Dynasty
is famed for its brutal and relentless melee combat strategies, then the Mefrit exist on the exact opposite end of the spectrum and harness the full might of the Necron's superior technology into weapons that can bring about the death of multiple worlds with each and every shot. There was a time when civilizations across the galaxy rightfully feared the Mefrit dynasty, as it existed as an infamous example of destructive excess. In this time before the Great Sleep, they were the planetary headsmen of all of the Silent Kings. They employed incredible star-killing weaponry that was capable of exterminating entire systems. Whenever somebody was needed to be made an example of, or an incredibly stubborn opponent shattered, it was the Mefrit dynasty that was unleashed to execute the deed. Their weaponry was said to be of incalculable power, stuff that the Necrons of today, although having some of the most powerful and advanced weaponry ever documented by mankind, made these engines of destructions look like children's toys by comparison. The Mefrit would mercilessly detonate the stars that gave their enemies' systems life, and their planets being frozen in the void or utterly annihilated in a seething storm of stellar fire. This method of warfare was something that was actually looked down upon by many of the other dynasties, as they didn't see anything honorable about simply exploding your enemy's sun and refusing to meet them in the field of battle. However, not all Necrons
win is a
agreed.
win.
Some applauded the Mefrit's deeds, as they saw them as the living avatars of Necron supremacy. Now, regardless of any individual dynasty's personal opinions on them, none could argue with the results, as countless interstellar campaigns were swiftly and decisively concluded as soon as the Mefrit got involved. They didn't seem to care what other Necrons thought of them, as from their perspective, to be feared was equal to or even superior than being respected and honored. One would pick back up with them in the 42nd millennium.
Machiavellian.
With many other dynasties, their power is only a fraction of what it once was, as most of their tomb worlds had been destroyed by the time they woke back up, and their Pharaon had been killed by Eldari infiltrators. But by far the greatest loss that the dynasty suffered was that the system-killing superweapons that they had originally employed had all but been completely destroyed, having fallen victim to the passage of time or picked apart piece by raiders that didn't know what they were. The dynasty is currently leaderless, and thus many ambitious nobles have thrown their hat in the ring in an attempt to gain control and become the new Pharaon. No matter how many wars each of these individual nobles win, or whatever acts of grandeur they may bring to fruition, the reality is that the first to be able to reclaim the ability to murder stars outright will surely reign supreme, and thus unify the dynasties under their banners. This has led many of these hopeful rulers to throw all of their resources behind the employment of ever more cryptex and the techno-andrites for aid. Technological superiority can come in a lot of different forms, and it doesn't just have to be a giant doomsday cannon. The sun-worshipping Necrons of the Nefric dynasty have equipped their legions with a particularly interesting and useful device that makes them stand apart from all the rest. The crown world of the
Mefrits. The solution to everything: blow up the sun. if you're not gonna nuke from orbit, then blow up the sun. Just blow up suns. And they don't have any leader either, so now they're operating on if one could pull off an exploding sun, then he'll rule. Then he'll be the leader of all. Yeah, another straightforward group like the Navok, like Novak. Just blow up the sun, you win. It's like there's no honor in it. They said, who cares? It's all about the results. It's all about the results. It does not matter, you know. You want things to get. They're very Machiavellian. They're like we rather blow up the sun and everyone fears us than praise us with honor. Better to be feared than honored, huh? Nefric Dynasty. This is a lot of dynasties. I wonder. I guess as time went on, each writer came up with their own dynasty and just added to the whole list of dynasties.
Nefric dynasty is particularly interesting in that it provides an overwhelming bounty of solar energy due to its 3 separate stars. Such a bountiful region ended up drawing the attention of imperial settlers who came to inhabit the planet while the dynasty slept. These settlers, however, would end up finding themselves in the direct path of another Necron dynasty known as the Altmore, who sought to harness the unlimited power of the suns for themselves. When the Nefric finally woke up, they were greatly offended by seeing both of these factions fighting over their stars, and the Pharaon of this dynasty had actually had his engrams corrupted during his sleep. He didn't just appreciate these stars, but had become completely obsessed with them. He viewed these interlopers as desecrating their sacred rites. He wasted no time in launching a campaign of lightning-swift and ferocious retribution that wiped out the remaining Imperial forces and drove off the rival Necrons. Many years have passed since the dynasty's awakening, and in that time, they have long harnessed the Triple Sun's energy to great effect, amassing huge arsenals of doomsday weaponry and other potent technologies with which to render all those that stand before them to nothing more than ash. Not only this, but their Pharaon had become so insanely obsessed with the importance of these 3 stars that he apparently wanted not just to harness their energy, but to become like them as well. He viewed himself as a celestial deity, and thus to be closer to the stars he worshipped, he instructed his cryptex to create for him a skin of living metal, that through advanced hyperchemical processes allowed him to basically transform into a being of pure light. This allowed Pharaon to cross incredible distances in the blink of an eye. This metagold skin proved to be so unbelievably effective that through the Pharaon's great benevolence, he would end up bestowing this technology to his most trusted overlords and lieutenants, as well as eventually working it into the bodies of his lesser soldiers as well. Now the legions of the Nephra crusade across the galaxy, advancing on distant battlefields in gilded magnificence, stuttering and blinking out of existence.
They got instant teleportation.
And nothing can get between them and their objective, as they simply phase through any obstacle they encounter. Although we've just covered...
So basically, they achieve Goku's instant transmission and spread it across the entire dynasty. They're like, boop, and then they pop up and they're like, oh man. Again, very straightforward. So it seems like some of the aside from Silent King and Stormlord, the Sawtek and the Stockholm, dang it, Saracom, I'm mispronouncing it, aren't I? Sarcom dynasty. Why am I mispronouncing it? Dang it. All the other dynasties are kind of like a Planet of Hats type of thing, rubber forehead people type of thing. They just have that one niche that defines them. Basically, from what I'm seeing here, whether it's teleportation or planet busting and so on. So yeah, these are the lesser dynasties. So what we got here?
The 6 main dynasties that come to make up the majority of the forces of the Necrons, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of lesser-known dynasties that currently exist in the grimdark future as well. One such dynasty is the Oriskar dynasty, whose primary purpose is to guard the celestial orrery, which is considered to be one of the most powerful weapons and useful scrying devices that exists in the physical universe. It is a giant holographic map of the entire galaxy that updates in real time and has the remarkable and unexplainable ability to cause any of the stars represented within its holographic matrix to spontaneously supernova if the user initiates the correct protocol. It would be utterly disastrous if such a device fell into the wrong hands, be those hands human, Eldari, Orc, Chaos, or even those of other Necrons.
Yes.
That's why the Oriskar dynasty remains mostly neutral in the Necrons' political squabbling. It's chosen to exist solely as the orrery's protectors, utilizing it only for scrying purposes and to trim certain undesirable elements from the galaxy. They understand that the consequences of using such a device can never really be fully quantified. And it's a common saying in the real world that if you were to go back in time and step on a butterfly, you could completely alter the course of history. Causing a
I can see it being used on Tyranids.
Supernova is like that on an incomprehensible scale. They have so much respect for this device that using it as a weapon is almost never done. There's another smaller dynasty known as the Thoct dynasty, whose core worlds exist in a region of space within Segmentum Pacificus, and this area is filled with radiation-emitting void rifts. Now, the cryptex of the dynasty have studied the rifts for multiple millennia and have learned how to harness this seemingly unlimited supply of radiation to further enhance the dynasty's weapons and soldiers, causing each and every one of them to shimmer with an unnatural glow. Their warriors
that's
on the
how
battlefield
hardcore.
emitting a deadly aura that causes their enemies to sicken and die while they march forward completely.
That's it. They don't even.
Radiation's devastating effects.
They don't have to do a
The final
damn
smaller
thing.
dynasty that I want to talk about, in fairness, isn't exactly a dynasty, but I think it's super cool. It's known as the Bone Kingdom of Drazik, which exists in the haunted region of space known as the Ghoul Stars. It's infamously ruled over by a single insane overlord, whereas every other Necron on the world's surface is a flayed one. Predatory and deranged Necrons that prowl the planet's surface, hungering for flesh and fighting amongst each other for scraps of rotting meat. The planet's ruler is known as Vargol, or the Fallen Lord as the other Necrons like to refer to him. He rules over this charnel kingdom and seemingly remains untouched by the flare virus that has consumed his people. Nobody knows why he has chosen to stay here, as it's not uncommon for Necrons to join other dynasties, and no truly sane individual would choose to stay on a planet populated
This is so
entirely
gruesome.
by insane murder robots that cover themselves in the skin of their victims. But for some reason he does, and the flayed ones choose to listen to him, as he's able to provide them with the only thing they desire: fresh meat. Every few months, when their gory reserves begin to run low, Volgol announces a time of bounty and dispatches his fleets to raid nearby worlds, seeking not riches, plunder, or even conquest, as they do not wish to fully eradicate any of the damned inhabitants of the Ghoul Stars worlds. They seek only to take tithes of gore and congealing blood,
Farms.
leaving enough living chattel behind to repopulate, or
Yep.
more accurately, replenish his feeding ground.
Cattle.
There are tons of other lesser dynasties, and perhaps I'll make a follow-up video in the future where we dive into each and every one of them. Do you know of any super cool and obscure dynasties that you'd love to hear me talk about?
Man.
What about all the ones we talked about today? Which one was your favorite and why? Personally, I play the Necrons in the 40k tabletop game, and I find myself using the Novak more than any other dynasty, as I'm a big fan of Flayed Ones and Necron Melee. But if I'm being honest with you, the Nihilic have got to be my favorite. Super rich Necrons in a gloriously gaudy paint scheme that have bigger and better equipment than everyone else it's just too perfect.
Yeah, this is for a group that went through revisions and controversial revisions, especially. This is a very well crafted and well thought out race here. The Necrons have got a nice variety of factions and characters. Very interesting ones, very scary ones, very hilarious ones. Just like the orcs, it's got you got your epic, and then you got your funny ones, and you got your scary ones. And this is definitely a fun group. The Necrons, very fascinating because they are behaving like a civilization. Despite what the Silent King had done to them, despite what he did to his own people, and then all of them, going to sleep for 60 million years, and then being out of basically out of time, displaced from time itself, and trying to pick up the pieces and everything. It was just a pretty good motivation. It's like, oh, we gotta get our worlds back. We lost them 60 million years ago. Surprisingly enough, the story does acknowledge that some worlds might have been destroyed after 60 million years or had its landscape gone, and of course, other races that discovered their worlds, looting whatever survived the 60 million years of environmental damage, and landscape changing. The fact that each of these factions are so unique unto themselves is fascinating. But I could also see, as Weshammer continued on, that they were degrading in terms of quality, like being fleshed out. Like, Stormlord, Silent King is clearly they're the two biggest factions amongst the top six, and they got the biggest, the most fleshed out of all of them. And then the other four just got that one niche. You got the rich faction, the bloodlust faction, the radiation faction, so on. Just that one thing, the planet busting, the sun exploding faction. So they kind of got a little bit down to being one-dimensional, flat on the side. Now I'm sure they probably got some stories fleshed out and everything, but in terms of characteristics, they did get reduced down to like a more one-dimensional, two-dimensional level in order to get that three-dimensional feeling of the dynasties. We need a name. Like this is fine. Like, I think it's the Novak dynasty. They don't no. Is it the Novak? The Novak is the no. Sorry, Mefrit. Mefrits are the ones with no leader, which is cool. Saying the Mefrits are the ones with no leader, with no clearly defined leader, and so they got a nice, fully fleshed out story going on there. But the other groups, like who's the the Novaks? Who does the Novak have specifically to follow? Saying like a named character. I'm sure there is, but Weshammer just summarized everything at this point. By this point, you know what I mean. And that's pretty gruesome, the Novak. They just bloodlust, and it's all narcotic and everything. But despite some of the factions getting a little bit on the flat side, going one-dimensional and two-dimensional in their characterization and storytelling, as a whole, it's pretty well executed. You know, pretty well done considering, you know, again, all the controversies, the controversial, you know, retconnings and everything. The lore meisters, at the very least, did a good job making the Necrons interesting, fascinating. You know, making giving them different factions or dynasties as they're known as, and having the internal conflicts going on. They're not just mindless murder drones, which the Tyranids are doing. That's their role now, and really making making the whole entire race. How you say? Making the race as a whole three-dimensional. Yeah. I guess I can't think of a better term to say it. You know, they got their own political intrigue. They will fight each other. They will try to conquer one another, or they'll utilize another faction to do something big. One of the ones that I found a very interesting is, of course, among the lesser dynasties, and that is the Aruskar dynasty. Is it the Aruskar dynasty? Yes, the Aruskar dynasty, the ones that are monitoring the orrery. Because one little tap and that's it. And most definitely, since they have to protect it, protect it from the Mephrit. They got to prevent the Mephrit from taking the orrery. If they take the orrery, they will definitely set off every dang sun imaginable and never have to never have to send any troops out there. I gotta say, coming up with the orrery was a very risky move. It was a very risky move, but they were able to because they could have been, because that's a big giant plot hole. I can tell you that right now. That was a plot hole waiting to happen. But by creating the Ruska to serve as the protectors of the orrery, and to make sure that nobody, not even Necrons, could go in there and maintain neutrality, helped plug the hole up. That's very good. You know, it's very good from a rank standpoint. It's a good plot hole cover, preventing any potential plot holes. And on top of that, by fleshing out like the Silent King and Stormlord, you know, and having their motivations somewhere else and not just conquest. You know, total conquest of the entire universe. Just let's get our planets back. You know, it kept the orrery in check, because logically speaking, they'll be like, well, you know, they'll be like, okay, if they wanna get, if the humans are a big problem, then why not just blow up the Earth and make the humans pay for invasion? You can't, because the Oruska is preventing that, because they're a neutral faction. Their job is to keep everyone, even the Necrons, from taking it, because it's that thing powerful, and they don't want the you know, the whole galaxy to be wiped out. Makes perfect sense, because then that means that and it makes even more sense for because the last thing they want is, if a Necron uses it, then all the other races are gonna wanna get to the orrery, press that button, and blow up the Necrons. You know what I mean? So it makes perfect sense that that's the Ruska's one big major goal, is to just keep everyone out and use it only to scry and knowledge. That's it. I like that. Honestly, I like that. I like that, because yeah, because if you think about it, you have to. This is actually pretty good. This is pretty good writing. You know, my brain is like amazed by it, because the orrery definitely is a major plot hole. It's a definitely major plot hole, but that's a plot hole that was well filled in. You know, it's very well filled in. I've no doubt that it prevented so many readers and story trackers from saying, well, why don't they just go to the orrery and hit a star and annihilate everything? If that's such a big deal. Same with the like the Tyranid situation. You know what I'm saying? You know, Why don't they gather up the Tyranids to one whole galaxy and just blow them all up? Well, sure, they could do that, but then the Tyranids are still outside the whole entire universe, and that's just a scouting group. That's just a scouting group. So yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. They did a good job covering the Ori and preventing potential accusations of plot holes and fridge logic and such. So yeah, the Necrons are definitely a very well redone group. I gotta say, it's very well redone. I like how they're all independent, they're all individualistic. I like that it broke the norm. The other thing I like about that too is that they broke away from your typical cliche robot. You know what I'm saying? The mindless Terminator or the hive mind Borg. The fact that they all got their own motivations, their own goals, and so on. As now or collecting flesh, immortal machines. Very well. It's very well done. Very well thought out. It really breaks the cliche and shakes it up with this type of character. This character type. Yeah. I like this. So, all right. That's Warhammer Research. Head on over to Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com and grab yourself a copy of The Impossible Man, a strange fantasy novel written by me. You'll find links to the book down in the description below, along with links to other merch as pins, stickers, t-shirts, music. Enjoy the products. Thank you for your patronage. And if you have a copy of The Impossible Man and did a lore video on my novel, thank you very much. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. And if you're interested, you could join me on my live multi-stream on Twitch and Kick in the evenings where I do lore research, Japanese cultural studies, gaming, and more. Look forward to hanging out with you. So, until the next round of Warhammer Research, thank you all for joining me, and I wish you all a good night. Buenas noches, and oisuminasai.